evening and welcome, the second half. And there's nothing like self-promotion, is there? So tonight I brought along with me, with the permission of the staff and those who own this wonderful place, some details of some talks I'm hoping to give beginning later in October at the Greyston Unity, the new Greyston Unity in Horton Street in Halifax. The details are over here if you'd like to pick up a copy. So, back to refreshments and comfort, and I'm sure this house has always given refreshments and comfort to a wide variety of people and philanthropic, well, ladies, as in the case of Elizabeth Wadsworth. She evidently did a tremendous lot to help people in the days before there was any idea of a welfare state. She was a kindly sort of woman, she was a privileged sort of woman, of course, but I think that, she did good, as, of course, the present owners of Holdsworth House are doing too. So we've come down to the beginning of the 20th century, and there was then a change of ownership here, and this has been quite interesting to explore who the owners were of Holdsworth House, which didn't seem to be very well represented in histories and that, and what they were connected with. So Sidney Woodhead, who had been a cousin of the Wadsworths, he was in due course to rent the hall out here and eventually sell it. And the man to whom he sold it was called Norman Scott Crawshaw. He came from Dewsbury, and he first of all rented the house here, and he was one of the founder and joint owner of a firm in Halifax, which may be familiar to you, had its basis down on Square Road area. The main building is still there. It was Wilby Insurance until recently, and this was the Automatic Standard Screw Company of Halifax. And you may have heard of that. He was one of the movers and shakers of that, and he made a lot of money from it. And we have here, again, the details probably won't show up at a distance. This is the 1911 census for Holdsworth House, or Hall as it is called, and we have Norman Crawshaw and his wife and his son. Then, in due course, the property passed over to this guy, and he was known as Neville Hoole. This is confusing because later on we have a Hoyle family, Hooles and Hoyles. You could make a good rhyme about it, I guess. So this is Neville Hoole getting married in 1932. He bought the property from the previous owner, but he never lived here. Whether he did intend to, we don't know. Anyway, that was Neville Hoole and his wife Hilda. Then, as I said, we confuse everybody by changing one letter from Hoole to Hoyle. And we have a family that was quite significant here for a good number of years. The exact year of the sale I'm not certain of, but certainly by 1940, this new owner was here, and he was Thomas Ashworth Hoyle. And he was in charge of the mills over at Copley, those wonderful mills founded, of course, by the Aykroyds way back in the 1830s. Much later, of course, they sold them off in the late 19th century, and Thomas Hoyle and Sons, that was the father of the owner here, they had a worsted spinning business that succeeded the business of the Aykroyds down at Copley. So this is Mr. Hoyle, and here we have his marriage to Marjorie Ayrton Broadhead. That took place at Halifax Parish Church in 1933, before, of course, he became resident here. We have some lovely images, old images from the Courier, of the parish church wedding, and all those lovely bridesmaids and a little lad too. They really went to town with the wedding portraits in the local paper in those days, but there was a great sadness which followed. The bride was to die after having given birth to just one daughter at the age of 31, and she died in 1937. And if you know Bradshaw Churchyard, There's a memorial to her there, and it looks like this. It's the largest memorial in Bradshaw churchyard, and I almost stumbled upon it by accident some months ago, so I was glad to find that. It's Marjorie's burial along with those of her parents who died later. So this was the first wife of Thomas Ashworth Hoyle, and he remarried. Again, a girl from Halifax, Hazel Smith. She was from Manor Home in Halifax, but they got married for some reason in London. No idea why. They went on to have 3 daughters, so there were 4 in the family altogether. During the Second World War, Mr. Hoyle served as a captain in the Royal Artillery. He was captured in North Africa, at Gazala, in 1942, and held as a prisoner for some years until the rest of the war was over, latterly in Germany, then released. This is an image from the Yorkshire Observer of Holdsworth House in 1949. We gather that the Hoyles did the initial creation of the formal gardens just in front of the hall, although they have been adapted and some of the shrubs and things altered since. And the Pearsons would tweak these later to the scheme we know today. This lovely portrait, about 1953, of the 4 Hoyle daughters. I just love the old frocks, don't you? The little girl obviously stood on some sort of buffet, and all the others all trying to look very smart. And that was when the Hoyle family lived here. So Hazel Katrina, Judith Gay, Jane and Caroline Wendy, those were their names. And in August 1958, the Hoyles hosted a garden party here, and that was in aid of Bradshaw Church. That was an interesting link connecting the Hoyles with the church and Holdsworth House, which had been connected through the foundation of the church by Elizabeth Wadsworth. And here we have Mr. Hoyle in 1959, but in 1962 he was to sell the property here to Freddie and Rita Pearson. Mr. Hoyle, he must have made a tremendous lot of money from that mill with the worsted weaving and so on, because when he died in 1981 he was a millionaire. It shows that he was a man worth a lot. So now we enter the modern era, we might say, the Pearson family era. Holdsworth House then, advert for it for sale. Cost £12,000. 5 bedrooms, 3 bathrooms, plus barn, and 3 acres of land. Not bad, even without the barn, you know, it's quite a reasonable price. If I saw it at that price, I might be tempted to take out a mortgage on it today. But remember, the value of money has altered greatly. So now we hear a little bit about Freddie Pearson, the father of Gail and of Kim, who is tonight. He was born to a relatively poor family off Church Street, not far from Halifax railway station, baptised at Halifax Parish Church, and this was in 1905. As a youth, he worked for his father's business, which was a greengrocery in the Peace Hall in the days when that was a wholesale market, of course. And he was given a horse and cart, and we are told delivered goods to Siddle, which was not the best area to deliver goods to, but the various sons, I'm told, of the Pearson family each had a horse and cart and would take goods around to customers, different areas. This is the 1911 census entry. Again, you won't be able to read it, I understand that, but just to explain, it shows the Pearson family at St John Street, Church Street. That was, if you come out of Halifax railway station, turn left past India buildings, on the right there used to be a filling station. You remember that? On that site earlier, there'd been a lot of back-to-back, quite poor quality houses from the later 19th century. And St John Street was one of those streets. It was a pretty rough area. And that's where the Pearsons were in 1911, in the early years. Freddie, who was one of the younger sons, went to work at Gledhills, the cash registers. I'm sure you all remember hearing about them if you didn't know them. But then he decided to strike out on his own, left the north of England and moved south to find his fortune. we gather that Freddie made some money making and selling Kirby grips. Some of you will remember Kirby grips. I'm sure my mother had some of those, but anyway, I've never tried wearing them myself. It's always the first time. And there's a wonderful story connected with a donkey, which is worth hearing about too, but I'm not going to touch on it now because our time is rather limited. So Freddie Pearson then, we see him here, he was quite a comparatively short gentleman. Here we see him with a bevy of party girls somewhere in the London area. And you can see that pose, can't you, those wonderful slacks. And he loved the nightlife. You can tell that, can't you, looking at that image. He longed to bring something equivalent to Halifax. That's a thought, isn't it? We leave that there then for the moment, and off we go. And he made some friends in London who were really very, very influential. Some of them had a lot of money, and he went around them. And one of these chaps was Redmond Cafferata, and he was of Italian descent, but living in England, a family living in England, a family that was fairly well-to-do. And Freddie went out to India in 1946, towards the end of the British Raj, and there, tragically, his companion died, and that's at the bottom, we can't see it clearly, I'm sure. That is the probate of Redmond Cafferata's estate. He died at the Baroda, Baroda in India, but he was resident really in London, and his estate was proved here. And it was at Baroda out in India, and also back in this country, that Freddie got very close to this chap who looks very ornate, a mixture of Western uniform and Indian pageantry or whatever. And he was the Maharaja Gaikwar of Baroda. He lived partly in Europe, and he had a fortune. He was very, very wealthy. And Freddie became a sort of Mr. Fix-It. That's what I've been told. No idea what that meant, but that's what I've been told. Freddie also frequented the best gentlemen clubs in London, the influence, these people. You've heard of some of these people. They were names when I was a little boy mentioned in the paper. There was Jack the Hacklet Whitty, and there are some twins who had a name like, was it Cray? And although there's no suggestion, of course, that Freddie had any doings with them, he was on the fringes of these clubs which these guys would frequent, which is quite an interesting connection to have, to boast about in retrospect when they're all dead and we know everything's respectful. Back in Halifax in due course, Freddie held a franchise for one-armed bandits. Now this was for part of the north of England, we're not absolutely sure how much. You know what a one-armed bandit is. It's like one of those guys in the street who wants all your money and won't let you have it back. It looks a bit like this. And this made him quite a bit of money. At this time, he was living up at Sorby, not far from the village of Sorby, at a house called Longfield, which is quite close to those lovely old houses on the hillside above the Ryburn Valley. And in due course, he was to marry, and this was actually as his second wife, to Rita Laycock, locally, and married in 1950. A very pretty lady there, we see her in a portrait. And Rita had worked for a while with Helena Whitbread at Harella in Halifax. I'm sure some of you will remember Harella. And there's a lady who goes around, Jean Illingworth, giving wonderful talks about her time as a model with Harella. So this is an interesting connection. We're almost connecting Holdsworth House with Anne Lister again. Hi Rachel, good to see you here tonight. Helena can't be with us, but her daughter is here with us tonight, which is lovely. So, the Hoyles had gone, Freddie and Rita were wanting to purchase, and they did. And they had grand designs. It was a time when houses were relatively cheap, houses of this type were relatively cheap, and also goods were relatively cheap, which might fit in with the architecture. The property in the late 19th century had been divided into two. A lot of changes had gone on with the internal walls. Many, many things had altered. Very, very few of the original fittings were still here. Most of the carvings and the timber work we see here were brought in by Freddie and Rita early in the 1960s. Much of it came from Derbyshire, we are told, and Rita had a wonderful eye for antiques as well as the wood carvings, the timber, wonderful eye for other antiques which still grace this wonderful place today. She also had a good eye for drapes and curtains, things like that, designs, and put together something rather special in the Halifax area, which required rather a bit of luxury. And what were they doing? Anyway, here we have two ladies with us here tonight on their way to school. And they're going to school in the winter of 1962, which was a particularly bad winter, so they didn't go by the normal means. You see, they were taken along like a sleigh. It's wonderful, isn't it? With the horse attached to the front. Don't know whether they still do that in the winters around here. Who knows? Anyway, something was being founded here. What was it? A new company, and this announcement would appear in the Halifax Courier, December 1962. Cavalier Country Club Limited, Holdsworth Hall, Homefield, Halifax. Nominal capital £10,000 in £1 shares. And then it goes on to mention Fred Pearson, Mrs. Rita Pearson, Paul Moore and Mrs. Joyce Moore, all of Longfield Triangle near Halifax. So that was the house they'd been living in. So more information and so on and so forth. The company was being registered. So a new club, Wadsworth House. A top man's club. It's a bit sexist, isn't it really? Why not have the women mentioned too? Champagne party on opening night. There, we have some wonderful seats in one of the rooms upstairs. The executive room called the de Aldworth room, as it is indeed tonight. So this was a venture, and it was the Cavalier Country Club. And Holdsworth House, or Holdsworth Hall as it was sometimes known, then seems to have had its name submerged under the title of Cavalier Country Club. Remember, it was founded in the days of the Cavaliers, the days of Charles I, and when people came here, we are told that men were dubbed Cavalier and women my lady. I don't know whether that was appropriate or not. You know, you just tell me what you think. If you're very, very nice to me, I'll call you Cavalier and my lady as you leave. So a wonderful new scene was opening up at this venue, which had been Holdsworth House, now called the Cavalier Country Club. There was a need to hire a chef, and a Spanish chef, whose name was Pepe Palomar, came up here from London. There was a European team brought in too, and the idea was that you could come here, eat and drink, and have a good time. Fine dining was assured, as I'm sure it is today. There we are. Do you remember the Guinness and the toucan? What toucan do and all that? So it's good to get down to draft Guinness at the Cavalier Country Club, Homefield, Halifax. Do you still serve Guinness, Liz? Yes, you do still serve Guinness. Waiting for the toucan. So membership of this club was 7 guineas a year, £7, 7 shillings if you like. What's that? Not a lot of money, is it? But it would have been a lot in 1962-63. This is a lovely aerial view which is on display out in the open area of the hall here, and it shows the countryside around Holdsworth House as it was in 1964. We can't see terribly clearly even if I point it out, but behind the hall, which is somewhere up here, we have the where we are today in the barn. Beyond that there were no buildings at all. Of course there's much, much more today. And it expanded. So, historic mansion becomes luxury club. This is the Halifax Courier again. 8th of April 1963, the launch. Capable of catering for 80 to 100 diners, rather like tonight in a sense, but I'm sure you had a far better time in 1963 than you have tonight. You know, think of all those people in costume. No, they weren't all in costume. Genuine antiques supplied by Maurice Goldstone of Bakewell to advertise the fact that there was some heritage features now in the house. 400 at Halifax Club opening. Goodness me, that makes our numbers tonight seem very small, doesn't it? 400 at the Halifax Club opening. It was a real grand do, and there's Freddie in the centre. Just 7 and 6pence for a businessman's luncheon buffet, 1963, 7 shillings and 6pence. What's that? About 35 pence, something like that. I think it's quite good, really, businessman's luncheon buffet. An advert there, you see, on the left. And here, so we have come now down to the famous visit of 1964, when the Beatles came on their one and only visit to Calderdale. And it was through a London connection of Freddie's, who was evidently known as Uncle Stanley. I don't know who he was, at least nobody's telling me. Freddie heard about this visit by the Beatles to the Alhambra at Bradford. And he thought it would be good, you know, good publicity if he could get them across here. So he somehow wangled it, and a scheme was devised so that people would not know where they were going after their performance. A kind of route was devised so that they went all round the wrong roads and things to disguise where they were off to, and they were off to stay here. And Holdsworth was not at that time really known as putting people up overnight at all, so nobody was going to suspect it, perhaps. And in the Ayrton room, where I was sitting earlier this evening to eat, that was where Paul and Ringo slept. And the Pearson family had to move out that night, did they not, in order to accommodate these world-famous guests who were just at the peak of their fame. And nearby in the Wadsworth room, we're told that Brian Epstein and partner slept. Doesn't look as if there's much room to sleep there in that picture. I suppose you could always try sleeping on the table, people have done. And again, you see the Pearsons had to move out of their bedrooms to accommodate these wonderful guests. And I'm sure many of you will have seen these pictures. They're available online. Some of them are in the brochure you hold tonight. And it was John Lennon's 24th birthday. This was, of course, coincidental. And also coincidental was the fact that he had raging toothache. So not the best kind of birthday to spend, you know, to relax. 9th of October then, 1964, 50 years ago, a week, yes, 50 years ago a week today. So there they are. We have Brian Epstein and friend on the left, and a very informal group, the Beatles on the right. So it was not a, you know, it was not a time for taking many formal images, and it was very low key. I don't know how many people outside the area knew where they were at the time. And we have with us tonight, oh no, so we don't have Paul McCartney with us tonight. That would have been really good, but he couldn't be present. We tried, but he wasn't available. But we have, very pleased to say, we have Kim Pearson with us tonight. Here she is when she was slightly smaller than she is now, and at Holdsworth House with Paul McCartney on that visit. So, a residential extension put on the back, over there sort of. Fairly basic, I think it's quite fair to say, without any criticism, perhaps there is criticism, but not a very good quality extension was put on the back in due course. And I realise I've got one of my slides out of order somehow here. Never mind, it doesn't matter. This is the famous bill which is on display outside here somewhere. And the chef addressed it to the Beatles, who were the creepy-crawly Beatles, of course. Remember, the chef was not English, so you can't blame him too much. And I dread to think what was in the kitchen that night if there were Beatles. I'm sure there weren't, absolutely sure there weren't. So May 1967, an example of other famous people coming along. The Skyliners, Marty Fane, Jim Senior, Ian Owens and Martin Hindle, who played regularly at the Cavalier Country Club. These were local lads, of course, but they received a visit from a very famous film star who was then playing at the Batley Varieties, and her name was Jane Mansfield. And she was very, very sexy, I am told. If you look at this picture, gentlemen anyway, I wouldn't like to say ladies too, enjoy the shapes whether you're a gentleman or a lady. Jane Mansfield at the height of her young career, tragically to be killed not long afterwards in a car accident in the United States. She was at one stage a Playboy centerfold. I don't know what Playboy is. If anyone wants to tell me afterwards, that's fine. So she was beautifully proportioned. There you are, you see. Beware of forward rotor blades. What is that? So here we have John Gregson. I'm sure many of you who grew up in a certain era like me might remember John Gregson on your TV screens. Silver Langover, perhaps a little less well known. They were welcomed by Freddie in 1967, so we're getting a few really high up stars coming to stay, and we now have more accommodation available at the back of Holdsworth House, which was middle of the road, nothing terribly special, but it could accommodate. And we have Gail Pearson here. I think she's maybe here somewhere tonight. I seem to have seen her, with Anne Ridler and James Ellis. I'm not sure whether any of you will remember them from TV years ago. Good, glad to know that. Rita and Freddie in the late 1960s. Nice to see her sitting on his lap. I'm sorry they haven't got more chairs. We have more tonight. And Rita took up some advertising, which was in the newspapers. There she is. Rita Pearson of the Cavalier Country Club, helping promote Midland Bank. There she is with the Midland Bank symbol, HSBC today, of course. And, you know, what is she saying? We wouldn't be where we are now without the Midland Bank. Is that still true tonight? I don't know. I don't know who they're bank with here tonight. Interior views in the 1970s. Those on the left are sort of greater quality, we'd say, the old part of the house, the hall, and the one on the right, a fairly basic bedroom in the new build. So, an account of an extension in May 1978, a 20-bedroom extension. And again, this was building further out, nothing of huge quality. But sadly, this was all ongoing, and then Rita died at quite a young age in 1981, leaving Freddie a widower. Now, a few years later, there was some improvements to the property. A lot of this new build was taken down and better quality structures erected, most of which are still there today. And Halifax Civic Trust, which I also represent here tonight, gave praise to the hotel and an award in a kind of presentation portfolio. And the mayor came up here to do that. So quality was now assured, if it hadn't been before. There are many images and many stories and many people who've worked here who are worthy of mention. Mary Holstead, the head housekeeper, here on her retirement in 1986 with Freddie on the left. And here we have Freddie on his own, about the same time or slightly after, and he died in 1989. And that's his obituary from the Courier. The funeral at Halifax Parish Church in September 1989. And here we have those girls who I may have seen around here tonight, that high or that high, who knows. Gail and Kim and New Era. Won't go into a huge amount of detail because most of us know what they've achieved here. But there's a few things to comment on. In 1964, John Lennon, when he was here, spotted an unusual pair of doors which Rita had got from somewhere. Nobody knew much about them, but they had some curious imagery on them, which looked as though they might be something to do with sorcery, perhaps. And at Holdsworth House, they were generally called the doors to the witch's cupboard. And then in 2018, when a certain programme came to Halifax, which was transmitted, I think, the following year, they were taken down to Peace Hall. And the doors were later to be used in the gallows pole. There's a little glimpse of them once or twice, if you've seen that series. But they were identified by Lisa Lloyd as being European doors and having once been doors to a medicine cabinet. So a medicine cabinet, you think of those slightly astrological people who cooked up various recipes of medicine in the old times. You know, they probably had strange fires that they lit and strange things they treat you with. So that's the story that came to light in 2018. So other celebrity guests, you might have seen this chap. I think his real name is Webb, but so never mind. He's called Cliff Richard tonight, and I've been told by Kim that he enjoyed eating in the old breakfast kitchen here at Holdsworth House when he stayed with Rita's sisters who helped work here, and he appreciated brown sauce. So when you want to get on the right side of Cliff Richard, a quick packet of brown sauce, just one of the small ones. In due course, and this is particularly of course in the 21st century, a whole sequence of television personalities, and we might say film stars too, have come here to stay at Holdsworth House. This kind of tradition, if you like to call it that, began with somebody called Jamie Oliver. And he had a media whirlwind visit in 2011, which is what, 13 years ago now, while filming Jamie's Great Britain. And the crew were around here for almost a week, and I'm told he was delightful to work with. But I don't think that's his wife, is it, with him there? Pardon me. Tony Robinson, otherwise always known to me as Baldrick, I don't know why that is, with the clock, the grandfather clock, we should still see out there. And last Tango in Halifax, I'm sure many of us will have watched that. Some will have liked it better than others. I thought it was rather good, but I know not everybody did. So this was a filming here. Many of you will know that, of course, Derek Jacobi and Anne Reid were here. Anne Reid has been here several times. And other characters you might care to recognise. Just outside in the garden. And there we have certain people, you might see their names, Sally, Gale, Anne and Karen Lewis. You might have heard of some of them. Sally being, of course, Sally Wainwright. So you know Anne Reid, I'm sure particularly. And we all know Gail because it's only thanks to her and her sister that you and I are here tonight, and thank you again. James Norton staying during the filming of Happy Valley, that same old but very fine grandfather clock. He looks as if he's a bit of a lad, does he not? And if you remember Happy Valley, Tommy Lee Royce, yes, a wonderful programme. I'm a great aficionado of that, although it's very, very dark and quite nasty in places. So David Mitchell, Rob Brydon and Lee Mack. Anybody been watching David Mitchell in Ludwig yet? Yes. I really enjoyed that new series. Great fun. Yeah, Rob Brydon and Lee Mack. That's 2022. Ewan McGregor, when they were filming A Gentleman in Moscow, that was partly filmed in Halifax Town Hall, though having watched parts of that series, I can't really make out which was Halifax Town Hall. So be that as it may, some series don't quite attract my attention as much as others. In 1997, we're going back a little while now to talk about the developments here. The period sunken parterre gardens were restored at the front of the house. And the design was taken from a book published way back in 1629, just 4 years before the hall was first built. And it was called A Garden of Pleasant Flowers, John Parkinson. So if you want a garden like that, get a copy of the book from 1629, and you will have a very fine parterre garden, and it looks lovely, does that, on a sunny day today, and if it was today, yes. And a fine, unusual garden sundial was created and added that year, which you can see still today. And inside the gazebo, that was beautifully redecorated and restored, having been restored. And there's a wall stencil decoration by Linda Brill, who's fairly local. And you can hold events in there, of course. You can even, I believe, get married actually in the gazebo. You can certainly get married in various parts of the building. And of course, that leads us on to many happy couples, and I'm sure there are many more lined up to come and get married here both this year and perhaps more likely next. Many weddings, or if not weddings, receptions held here at Holdsworth House. So today, what do we have? We have a 4-star hotel with something like 33 rooms. The number, I'm not quite sure if I've got that right now. Did we say it right? Is that about right? Good. We had a bit of a discussion about this because apparently the number of bedrooms has fluctuated over the years. Probably depends on how many people are here or how many they've locked in the dungeon. So there's the gateway, and instead of gates, they have human beings as gates. I don't know what the significance of that is. That looks a little bit familiar, doesn't it? It reminds me sort of vaguely of this room, just sort of, arranged with chairs with hats and coats on, if I may say so. So, lots of events can be held in here, as you'll gather, as tonight. So, past, present and future. We come towards the end. We've heard about the past. We know a bit about the present here tonight. We've heard about some recent history. So, regarding the future. Sometime in the near future, the date hasn't finally been agreed, the Halifax Civic Trust blue plaque will be placed to mark 60 years since the Beatles' visit to Holdsworth House. And the current management comments, we are always looking to develop the business to ensure its future and continually employing local people. And we have some of the local people with us tonight, I'm sure, who are greatly appreciated with their service for us. While I was doing this preparation for this talk, which took quite a long time, as I think you will realise, it was a larger task than I had fully anticipated, I came across a lovely resident of Holdsworth House, and this is he. And this is Eric, who was a resident cat here for many years. He was a delight. I love cats, and he became my friend whenever I visited him. I'd seen him once or twice before, and he was a great character, but sadly, not too long ago, he passed away. So I remember Eric, my friend, as well as my good friends, all of you who are here tonight. Thank you all very much indeed. I hope you're not going to get home too late to your normal bed cap, well, not nightcap or bed warming or whatever you do. So my particular thanks, you may not all be able to see this, and perhaps it's not necessary to read through the list entirely, but particular thanks to Holdsworth House Hotel for inviting me originally to put this together and present it, for their support, and they gave me immense support, illustrations and facts which I couldn't have found otherwise. Particular thanks to Gail and to Kim and their families, and particular gratitude also to Liz Howe over here, who has helped guide me through and been my greatest support, I think. Thank you very much, Liz. But also thanks to Lynn Sunderland, whose late husband, as I said, was descended from the Wadsworths and also from the subsidiary family, the family that married into them, the Sunderland family, and whose husband carried forward an archive, really, that had been kept in his family, without which these portraits, which we have already referred to outside, which are shown in the pedigree, which you all have a copy of, I trust, those were all put together at the encouragement of Lynn Sunderland. She was a delightful lady. She is a delightful lady, but she's on holiday tonight. She was really gutted she couldn't be with us. So I'd like to thank her in her absence, but also to say that I hope there'll be another opportunity when she can see this presentation as it is. So Liz has presented these family portraits, which Holdsworth House are absolutely delighted to have for the future. and the connections. And we have also, still in Lynn's possession, she it is who has kindly loaned the silver items, which are back at Holdsworth House for say one night only, whatever. And they haven't been here, as far as we know, probably since the time they passed down the female line of the Wadsworths into the Sunderland family, perhaps before 1900. So it's wonderful to see these back here tonight. Thanks also to many other people on whose information I have drawn. I hope I haven't intruded on any copyrights. If I have, please tell me. And thank you all again very much.